How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. Today you find me in sunny Cyprus on an early morning looking out over this beautiful view that I'm trying not to fall off of behind me. Yeah mate, look at that. Absolutely unreal. Where I'm staying right now, on a cliff edge looking out over Cyprus. You can see straight down into the sea, all that good stuff. But we're not here today to talk about this lovely scenery. We're here to talk about this, the second generation post facelift Kia Picanto. Now, I've been wanting to drive one of these for a really long time, as in I've wanted to work out whether or not they're a good first car as a key point, but also whether they're just a good cheap car for the city, for driving short distances, and for general ownership and running around and batting around in. So in this video, I'm going to answer those questions. Is this car a good first car? Is it good in all those different ways I've just mentioned? I don't know. Well, actually, I do know. I have an idea. I've been driving it now for a week, and I'm going to give you guys an understanding of my thoughts on the Kia Picanto. So before I waffle too much, let's get right into it. Remember to hit the like button if you enjoy this kind of video, subscribe as well if you're new here, and without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, since I'm talking about the value of the car here, I want to start by talking about the price of these used. Now, if you want to get one of these on Auto Trader right now, you're looking at between £3,500 for absolutely ropey examples with the post facelift, to around about £5,000 for really, really nice examples. Now, that already rings an alarm bell for me. Spending £4 grand, £4.5 grand-ish on your first car is a lot of money to spend. I know that obviously car prices are quite high today, but there has to be a really good reason for why you would spend that kind of money on a first car. Now, I know it was a few years ago, my first car was only 400 quid, but so was my second car, my Polo or whatever. All of these cars have been 400 quid-ish, and I generally think of first cars as being in and around the £1,000 mark. So this has to be 4 times better than those cars in order to make it worth the money in my head. And typically in the past when I've reviewed cars, I've been pretty positive about them. I'm generally a very positive guy when it comes to talking about cars. In this case though, there are some things that have turned me off of the Picanto, and we'll get into those. One thing that you have to know about this car though, before we get into anything, is that it is £0 per year in road tax. This is the 1 litre inline 3 engine on this one, and it costs you nothing. £0 per year in road tax, which means that you are around about £200 per year better off before you even started driving either this or the Polo. Obviously the Polo being 4 times cheaper from the start though. And I've jumped into the car right now because it is so hot outside that the camera lens is steaming up. Yeah. Not ideal. Let me try and brave outside though, because one other benefit of this car is the fact that it's supposed to do around about 64 miles per gallon, according to Kia at least, which is not bad at all, particularly if you care about your fuel economy. Although I would say that the way that I drive probably wouldn't enable you to yeah, have that kind of fuel economy, but whatever. Let's quickly look around the outside of the car then. It is a very basic design. There's nothing too special about it. I don't think it needs to be as a first car, as a city car. They need to be rough and ready, basic and simple and easy to use. There's nothing too special about it. I mean, it's the base spec with the non-alloy. It's got the steelies under the hubcaps. It has got a very basic interior as well. The spec in here is literally as basic as you can get. You've got the base radio, you have got the the base seats. Everything in here is basic. I will talk about this more when I'm actually driving the car. And the car is also absolutely tiny. It's only 3,600 millimeters long, and it is 1,600 millimeters wide, which is actually smaller than my Polo, crazily. It's 50 millimeters less in terms of width and about 300 less in terms of length, and that really plays out in 2 major areas. The first one is back in here, the lack of legroom, particularly if you're behind me, and I don't think I've particularly moved myself very far back there, but the legroom in here is pretty poor. And then if I jump around here into the boot, then this is where I think it really lets itself down. This boot, you can't even fit my arm in there, as in my forearm in there straight. It has to go in sideways, which is pretty annoying. And I think that actually, if you were doing a big shop or something, or if you were taking all your mates out somewhere and you wanted to put luggage in the boot, yeah, this is not the car for you. And in my head, that really restricts it to being a city car, specifically a city car. But yes, as I said, the exterior of this car is not important. It's really not relevant to what we're doing here. Like, as in, if it's going to be a good first car, in my head, it needs to do a few things. 1, it needs to be cheap to buy, and 2, it needs to be cheap to own, particularly in today's society with fuel prices being so high. 3, it needs to be be fun and engaging to drive to some degree. It needs to be the kind of thing that you can get used to learning where it is to drive, be out on the roads and have a good time. It needs to be practical enough that you can get all your mates in here, you can play your tunes, you can do whatever you want to do. All those different stuff needs to be available in this car. And just overall, it needs to be really good value for money. I just want this car to be really good value for money. And if I'm honest, before we even get into driving it, that's kind of where I think it might be letting itself down. But yeah, let's get into the driving and I can show you guys exactly what this car is like to drive around. Mate, it's hot. Blah. I love going on holiday, mate, and I love spending time in nice, hot, sunny countries. But yeah, I like to stay in either an air-conditioned room or relatively close to a pool. That's the ideal. But yeah, without sounding too much like a princess, let's take this car for a drive and see what it's like to drive around. So I want to get straight into this and just start talking about my experience of driving it over the course of this week. It hasn't been as economically friendly as I hoped it would be. Now, the prices out here in Cyprus where I am are really cheap for fuel compared to the UK. They're not super cheap. They're about €1.60. So what, like £1.50-ish per litre. So they are cheaper, and I think it cost me approximately 30 to 40 euros to fill the tank on this, which is not bad at all. But that shows you that the tank is actually quite small on it. And so yes, even though you might be getting pretty good miles per gallon, in terms of the distance you can go on one tank, they're pretty low, I would say, compared to some other cars that I've driven. Which means that even with the good fuel economy, you're probably spending a lot of time at petrol stations regardless. I'm going to start by taking it around some town sort of environments here. So I've been driving it a lot around this Paphos area that I've been in, and it has been very nice. Like, it's been doing its job as a city car. I think it does feel how modern city cars should feel, and that's probably where the start of my problems are with this car. I think that modern city cars, or at least in this case with the Kia, I feel like they are so unengaging to drive. It is a real shame. And I don't know what this dude's doing here, but he's taking his sweet time to get across the road. Bro doesn't give a fuck anymore, does he? He's just done. Cool, whatever. But yeah, they feel super unengaging to drive, and I find that a real shame. It just feels like I'm driving a boat, honestly. Genuinely, it feels like I'm having to wrestle this boat around the corners each time. Even if the car is so small, it feels so big. And I don't mean that in a good way. Like, sometimes small cars feel big in a good way. I think that this car feels big in a bad way. The front of the car is so close to me, but I can't see it. It drops away the moment and I'm at the top of the car here. I can't see the front of the car, so I can't guess where the front of the car is. And like, obviously you get to the point where you can do it by intuition, but even with intuition, I have no idea where the front of the car is. So it could be 10 miles long, or it could be tiny in front of me, if you know what I mean. So it feels big around you, and then when you drive it as well, when you turn it around corners, the amount of body roll, genuinely the amount of body roll when you drive this car is just ridiculous. So I'm gonna just run it in a bit wide, and like literally, it's not even a deep corner, and already like the car just wants to go onto that front right wheel. The body roll is insane. So the handling on this car, dead. Like it feels massive. It feels like I'm turning a boat. This car does not feel anywhere near as nippy, lightweight, and like handly as it maybe should. So coming through here, then let me just turn right here. Oh. Hopefully that made some sense. It understeered massively. The front wanted to go over there somewhere. The car, we just felt like everything in the car and every part of it wanted to go over there. I think that is the opposite of what you want in a first car. You want a car as a first car that just feels like you could just bomb it into a corner, bomb it around the corner and get away with whatever. You want it to be really forgiving. You want it to feel like you're attuned to the car, as opposed to like trying to manage the car. I feel like I'm managing everything here. I'm managing the turns. I'm managing when I put the throttle on, blah, blah, blah. It's all just, yeah, that has really, for me, that really lets the car down. And there will be some people in the comments saying like, oh, why are you judging a first car on its handling? Honestly, my Skoda, my first car, massive car compared to this. Like, it was way bigger. Obviously it was an estate, so it was a way bigger car, but the way that it handled was so much more predictable. And as a first time driver, you want a car that is predictable predictable in the way that it handles. Yes, it had body roll, but the body roll was consistent, and you could tell where it was going to understeer and where it was going to grip up. On this, I couldn't tell you where it's going to grip up. I literally couldn't. And I couldn't tell you why it understeers. It has no reason to, it just does. The amount of body roll it gives you is, yeah, nuts. I'm ranting at this point, so I'll probably have to try and cut some of this bit out. Now, obviously it's a city car, so I maybe shouldn't always consider its relevance as a motorway car, but I did take it on a motorway here, or a equivalent of a motorway here in Cyprus, and it held its own. It was fine, it was comfortable. Their motorway speed limits are slightly lower than ours in the UK, so it was maybe not a fair test from a UK point of view, but the car felt fine. I think when that whole thing about it feeling big and burly and whatever comes to a real, a benefit to the car when you take it on the motorway. One thing I would also say that is a negative about this car is that it feels incredibly cheaply made, like as in a different level of cheaply made. Like everything squeaks and rattles, and like it feels worse than I wanted it to. I really wanted this car to be like the ideal cheap and cheerful car. That's why I went for it. I was like, oh, let's go for a cheap and cheerful car that you can just bat around and just, yeah, not even worry about. I wanted it to give me almost like Jimny vibes, the way that it was driven, and it really doesn't. It doesn't at all. I'd probably have something cheaper and nastier than this if I was going to spend the money. Like the design in here is fine. I'm not going to complain about the design, but then again, like the radio, I could get better radios on older cars. Now again, don't get me wrong, absolutely fine from a first car perspective, but there are cars that are half the price of this to do the same thing. That's all I'm saying. Now in 2011, Top Gear actually gave this car the best value for money car of the year. So the best value for money car by Top Gear in 2011 was this car, which I think is probably fair enough at the time. It probably was great value for money when it was brand new, because it probably was super cheap. It was really less than 10 grand even, wasn't it? It's really like 7 or 8 grand or whatever when it was new. But as a used car, second hand, whatever it is, that kind of money, no way am I spending that. I would much rather buy a 9N3 Polo and run that around. That would be a way more useful first car in my opinion. It is slightly more up-to-date looks than the 9N if you don't like the rounded headlights. It has basically the vast majority of the same features as this car, and if you haven't got them, then a cheap radio will get you the radio features that you want. No big deal. I think I spent what, like 80 quid on my radio, and that was more than I needed to spend to get into something half decent. But yeah, like the car is fine. It's just not good. If I had this in my first car, I would have been obviously chuffed. Any first car, you'll be happy with it. It's your first car, you're gonna love it to bits. But it wouldn't have given me the same experience as something like the Skoda, same experience as something like the Polo. I'd rather have a VW Up, I'd rather have a Skoda City Go, I'd rather have a Polo, I'd rather have, yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of little cars that I'd probably rather have than this one, which is a real shame, because I thought this was going to be way better than it's actually turned out to be. I honestly think that if this car cost 2 grand, I'd be singing its praises. I'd be saying, wow, this is a great first car, you should go for it. Yeah, it's a bit unengaging, it's not particularly enjoyable from a driver's point of view, but overall, really great value for money. Like 2 grand, you can't go wrong, what a car. Yeah, I'd be all over it. As it is not any of those things, I can't in good conscience tell you that this is a good first car for 4 or 5 grand. Like, that's just not money that I'm willing to spend on it. If you're a subscriber and you have been for a while, you've probably seen my videos talking about cars under 5 grand, under 3 grand, under 2 grand, under 1 grand, whatever it is, right? You've seen these different videos, and you've seen cars that have similar offerings to this. In fact, this is probably even featured in previous videos for cheap first cars and that kind of stuff. I have, however, in the past proven that this car can be insured cheaply, so that is a benefit. If you're buying it as a first car, you can get relatively cheap insurance on these. As I said, the tax being £0 is a massive help as well. So if this is the car that you can afford to buy, you can afford to insure, and you can afford to get road tax on, absolutely go for it. Why not? This is 100% a fine car from that perspective. If you have other choices on the table, consider them first. I think that's all I need to say about this car, otherwise I'll continue to waffle on into oblivion. So thank you very much for watching. Apologies to Kia, I didn't like the Picanto very much. Even though you guys have done bits with the other cars, the Stinger and etc. recently, I just didn't like this one very much. Massive thanks to the patrons for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.